Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Art of Cybersecurity series by Seven Rules Cyber with me, Chirag Joshi. I'm your friendly neighborhood Sizer who tries to demystify all the exciting things that happen in cybersecurity that sometimes can be scary and overwhelming, but often is just something to be understood more than feared. So we focus on a lot of discussion topics that you the audience of the show and our supporters have kept in touch with us all throughout and support us on the journey, which we really appreciate. Today's topic, though, is a very special one. It's a special one because of the wide range of impact it has, not just on us professionals in our corporate lives, but also in our family lives, in our personal lives. It impacts our families, our kids, people who we care about. So the focus of today's conversation will be on cyber safety, about cyber behavior change, cyber psychology, and how we can intersect what works well for us in our corporate lives or in our personal lives and bring them together as a holistic, because I think those are the best things for us when we can inculcate habits. We don't think about fitness or workouts as being, a personal thing or a professional thing. It's just who we are. How can we think about cybersecurity and cyber safety in the same way? I mean, that's the idea. And to join me on this discussion, I have just the perfect person. I've been excited to talk with her as we've been thinking about this concept. And our guest, welcome her formally, is Dr. Anu Rao. Dr. Rao is a noted academic, entrepreneur, and a massive cybersecurity and safety advocate based out of Singapore. And she has done a lot of great work, which we'll obviously share in the show notes when it comes to her bio. But I want to formally introduce Anu to the show and welcome you, Anu. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Chirag. Thank you for having me here and Happy New Year. It's already 2024.
It is 2024, and I have a hard time kind of just coming to grasp with that, right? I still, when I'm writing or when I'm typing, I remember it's 2024 and we are in the new year. So no, Happy New Year to you as well, and so much exciting things to look forward to.
Yeah, likewise,
Yeah.
likewise.
So Anu, I gave a very quick couple of lines about you, but I would really like you to talk a bit more about your experience, your journey, and introduce you to your audience. And the reason why I would like to come from your own words is because there's a very inspirational journey behind it. And the industry that you work in, the passion that you have for cyber safety security, there's a personal angle to it. So I really wanted to come from you. So if you can, that'd be great.
Okay, sure. So I like to describe myself as, in simple terms, a cyber security and cyber safety awareness entrepreneur, but I'm also an educator. I've been teaching at universities in Singapore since 2009. And my job, so it's more than just a job, actually. It's like a mission. I feel very, very passionate about this, is to make every single person who uses an internet device, anything that's connected to the internet, we have to keep those people safer and happier. So we spend so much of our times online, Chirag. And the thing is that, do we know enough about how to keep ourselves not just safe and secure, but also happier? Because I think they go hand in hand. So my journey has been to get more people aware that online space, it's amazing in many ways. We've gone through COVID. We need new technologies for so many things, but how many of us really know the dangers that lurk online? And I'm not just talking about for corporates. I'm talking about, as a parent, I have two children, and one of my big things is to ensure that families can stay safer, because we spend so much of time online together and individually in cyberspace. So these are some of the things that I really believe we as a society need to know more about. And I mean a global society, because the internet is everywhere. So that's been something that I focused on for the last few years very intensely.
That's actually really great. And it's, I mean, the passion that you have for it really comes through. And I know you and I have had conversations about this. So I'm excited to go a bit deeper into some of it. So maybe the first thing we start with, right, Anu, is we've talked about the cyber safety aspect of it. And we've talked about the need for us to be cyber safe, and not just us as adults, but also for kids, for teenagers. Uh, Maybe we start there. What does cyber safety mean to you? Uh, how do you define it? And what are some of the challenges that you believe are the most pressing one when it comes to cyber safety?
Okay, so what does cyber safety mean to me? I think that's a great question, Chirag, also because there's different kinds of terminology here. So I'm an academic, which means that I focus on terms and definitions. And I think let's try and figure out this difference between cyber security and cyber safety first. And again, I'm just going to put this in really simple terms. So when we talk about cybersecurity, and this is something that you're the expert in, so feel free to weigh in if you need to add something. But when I talk to the people that I'm teaching or training, I'll make it simple and I say that when we talk about cybersecurity, we're looking at our devices and data and how to protect them and keep them safer and more secure. When I talk about cyber safety, we are referring to how to keep us, the users of these technologies, safer, secure, and like I said, happier. Because often the focus has been on the tech. But guess what? We use the tech and we need to be safer as we use it. And I think that's the focus that, I mean, it's not just me, there's many other people working in this area that really feel that we as individuals need to be aware and need to be empowered to be able to have the lifestyle that we deserve when we're online, whether it's work, play, or leisure. So that, in a nutshell, is the difference between cybersecurity and cyber safety. And why, and I'll talk about what I see as the challenges and the dangers, but just a bit of backstory. And as you know, I started this whole focus on cyber safety and cybersecurity awareness because when I was working in academia a few years ago, I was at a real crossroads. I was going through this big change in my personal life, and it got me thinking that I really want to do something that I am happy to do. And while I was happy in academia, it didn't really make me feel passionate about what I was working on. And that's why I started my own company while continuing to work in academia, because I think more people need to know the concept of cyber safety, and it needs to be in a language that people understand and the language that they feel that they can, absorb and use in their daily lives. So it shouldn't just be these big terms that only tech people or academics or policy researchers focus on. I wanted everyone to be able to really understand, this, it applies to me. It's not the IT person's job. It's not the government's job. It's also my job. And so that's where the whole focus is. We live in such an interconnected society that if every person started to think a little deeper about what their role was to keep, say, their family safe or their organization safe, we would have a much stronger cyber culture already. And so that's how the journey started. I have two kids, two girls, and I was worried. There's this literally, I would say, and I say a much stronger word, but I'm toning it down. There's a lot of junk online that I would not want my own kids to access. And I know a lot of parents feel that way. And that's how it started, right? Like, how do we make sure that parents are empowered? Because a lot of parents in their 30s and 40s and even 50s never had this education. I did. And so the journey is to get more people empowered along the way. And that's how it began.
No, well said. And that's a very important part that you hit on is the not everybody is equally familiar with these things, and which is why the education is such a key part of it. Uh, and we know that technology has made our lives easier in so many ways. And I always talk about when I talk about my presentations. In fact, even in my books, uh, I've placed a big emphasis on the role of cybersecurity being this enabler of human trust, of human progress rather, through trust in technology. Because if you can't trust something, you can't, maximize its potential, and security plays a big role in that. But safety, to your point, uh, the bad behaviors or the even criminal behaviors that we always had in our society have migrated online.
Yeah.
We think about bullying, we think about scamming, we think about fraud. Those migrate to an online construct, a digital construct, where because of the nature of it, it becomes a lot easier. You can reach a lot more people. And the consequences of it can also be equally devastating because, if you have to deal with a bully in your school, years ago, you could come back home and, you were in a safe space. And now, thanks to, your phones and whatnot and the devices that we have, this is never ending. It can be persistent if it's a problem. So I think that to me is such an important aspect of safety, as you brought up, is the impact on us, and we need to educate people. So maybe we start with that aspect, right? And I will come to security later. We'll come to all the practices there, but let's talk about safety for now. And in that area, let's talk about kids. And you brought up, that you have two daughters. Uh, with kids, or when I say kids, I'm thinking, not just I'm thinking teenagers as well, preteens, uh, but still kids. What what do you think are some of the messages that we need to, as parents, as adults, as people who care about them, need to give them some practical, tangible advice that'll, one, resonate with them because they'll learn differently than we do, and two, is something that will entice them to learn more about it, right? And not just think of it as one more thing my parents told me that I have to do. What are some of your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Chirag. You hit the nail on the head. I think there's so many different things you've said that that we can, take from here. One is that yes, the education that we give our young people has to be in a language that they're excited to listen to, that it can't be in the same top-down manner that things are taught generally. And there's actually a lot of great work being done in Singapore, and I'm familiar with, by many different stakeholders that are doing this, that are working with young people in languages that they feel are applicable. It's still, we have a long way to go because the traditional method is top down, where we kind of lecture. And so the idea is, how do we understand their world better? So I think like my kids have given me a good perspective. So they're 16 and 11. And I say that my older one has been like my guinea pig in this area, because ever since she got a laptop is when I started on my journey, because it suddenly struck me that, okay, I am not very equipped to deal with this, and I definitely wanted to be. And so the journey has been, and with my younger child, because she was already seeing that this was how things are. We have to have rules. It's not a free for all. I always tell parents, like, we have to have the same analogy. Would you let your child out in the middle of the night into, say, a club or on the road, perhaps not in Singapore, but elsewhere, and think it's okay? And most parents would say, no, I would never do that. But in the same way, they give their child a digital device with no parental controls, or what I call the talk. And it's equivalent to letting your child into an even more unsafe world if you don't have those restrictions. So once we put it in that kind of language, parents, it becomes apparent to parents that there are a lot of dangers online that, to be fair, if I wasn't in this area, I wouldn't know. But there are a lot of dangers that because I teach at university here, it's part of my job to teach and research and to be updated on this. So I'm not making it sound worse than it is. It just is that bad. So the idea is that as parents, we need to be able to understand their worlds. So what I've been doing, and this is what a lot of cyber safety best practices and educators talk about, is spending time with your kids on things they love, so that you know what they're doing. So it's not just them doing something and you doing something. So common practices, just a few I can give is, for example, especially when they're younger, that there's a common area, a living room or a dining area, where people do all their whatever they need to online, so that a supervisor or a parent can see what's kind of happening and know to intervene when something seems a bit off. Simple practices like when you're on the dining table, just to have conversations and no digital devices, for example, right? So how do we constantly talk to our children in ways that don't involve tech all the time? I think that's important, to take time off from tech, because we're so connected to it. And that's one of the things that, if you said, what are some of the red flags? Some of the red flags are always being connected to technology, so that our brains don't have time to kind of detox, and we miss the red flags. We miss the bad actors and the bad action. So I think that's some of the things that parents and even adults have to focus on, is not being so immersed in technology whether it's, you move from your digital devices at work to home and home to work and have a very little break. That's not good for our brains. And that's what the bad guys are looking for us to be making mistakes, because we're quite overwhelmed in our daily lives.
Yeah. No, and you're right. It's and also think with kids, you mentioned what's happening in Singapore. Here in Australia, we have the Office of E-Safety Commissioner, which does a lot of great work on this front, along with other safety areas as well, for senior citizens and so forth. So I always encourage people to check resources out that the government puts out there. But with regards to kids, and you brought up a really important point, is devices in shared areas, having that conversation, making them aware of the risks and red flags to look for, uh, because we know predators are their activities online, and they are in games, in different areas, where the kids are, and try to talk to them. There's so many stories, horror stories, that still keep coming up despite us talking about these things, which means it's even more important to do so. And again, I'm not gonna, tell parents how to parent their kids, but I do think parents need to be parents sometimes. And there's an age to be a friend, and this is my personal opinion. There's an age to be a parent, and I think sometimes that's really important, because you're right. Like, you would never leave your child in a open area or nightclub, and why would you do the same thing online in a wild west, which is even worse sometimes, because it's hard to monitor that. Parental controls, to your point, is a very important aspect of devices and what they're doing on devices. And I think, as much as we can educate kids, that don't take pictures and post online, I mean, that is such an important thing. And I feel the apps that they have access to, these applications, and people who make these applications and organizations who make them, need to be held to some account for the safety by design, so that kids can use it safely. But it's also incumbent upon parents, right, that kids are not using apps that are not meant for them. TikTok could be great for somebody. I'm not sure if it can be great for a kid. So I think that's not my decision to make. But as long as parents are aware of the risk themselves, they're in a better position to educate their children. And I think this day and age, uh, there is an information overload almost. I think there is a lot out there, which makes it really hard. Like, where do I get started even? And which is where people like you and I, and which is why, we do these educational sessions, and we encourage, so there's a structured way where we can give people what they need, and which is where breaking it down into specifics. And sometimes you need to customize it to your own individual circumstances. And because every kid's different, every parent's different. So I'm not going to say one size fits all, but the message and the overarching goal is the same, I guess. So I think that's really good. Now, if we transition a little bit to, you brought up psychology, you brought up the aspect of the fatigue factor because of our always connection to the online world where we never really take a break. Uh, and I love psychology. I love it because that's what informed my first book, which was around behavior change and cyber awareness. And it was derived from lessons in psychology. And a big part of it was not relying on fear, because fear is not a good motivator for people to change habits in the long term. Like, it works for short terms, it just can't do it long term. But I also think, along with that, the question I have for you is the soft skills aspect of it, right? And I'm transitioning now just from kids to actually all of us. How important are the soft skills, uh, that are empathy, storytelling, and others, as we send this message to the people we care about, our employees, our fellow professionals, our organizations, or our families? How important are soft skills, and what are some of those that you think can help them?
Yeah. I like the concept of, well, I like not to call it soft skills in a sense. I know that there is that dichotomy, but we'll just use that term for want of a better word. I think because soft skills are hard in the sense that they are not easy to pick up. They require a lot of time thinking about the human aspects, the social aspects. And we know that soft skills are one of the key skills for the workplace going forward, because communication, empathy, like you said, active listening, these are all things that define how relationships work better in the workplace. And that's what you want, to have a workplace where things are good and people can communicate with each other in an empathetic, kind way, not just face to face, but also online. So the same principles apply in online spaces as well. And this kind of relates, not kind of, this relates to my PhD background. I did my PhD in communications and new media, and some of the things involved looking at how these soft skills, communication skills, transfer to the online spaces. And the other aspect was, of course, looking at the impact of new technologies on us, on individual societies and politics. So there's a lot of that work that actually comes in to the work I do now. And when we're talking about soft skills, one of the things that I teach and train, now I train on mostly, but that I have taught in the past, is called critical digital literacy. It basically means going beyond digital literacy to really, what does it mean to think critically? It means to question things, to think about something in a deeper way. Is this true? Is this not? So for example, if we have a piece of information that comes on our, as an example, on our WhatsApp as a message, look at it. Is it true? Do you need to cross-verify it a bit more before you send it to, excuse me, 50 other people? Do you even need to send it at all? If something is wrong with it, maybe you go back and cross-verify it and tell the person who sent it, hey, something's not quite right here. So these are examples of critical digital literacy. It's beyond having access to data and to know how to use the internet. We have to go one step beyond now because we're living in smart cities and smart nations. So we have to think smarter. And thinking smarter means questioning, what are our actions online? How are we behaving online? Because how one person behaves really influences the whole network because we're also interconnected. So I know it's a very long way of answering your question because there's just so much to say, Chirag, but there's the soft skills, there's empathy, there's critical thinking. And when I said information overload, that's one part of it, to really know that how immersed we have been in either social media or gaming or even just texting, that we are overloading our brains and we're not able to focus on what's really priority.
Yeah, look, and I like that. And in my second book, Seven Rules to Become Exceptional at Cybersecurity, one of the rules is master the art of differentiating skills. So I call them differentiating skills because I think if two people have the same technical skills, these are the type of skills that take your careers forward, even if it's from that perspective, or makes an impact. Because you're right, like this world that we live in, increasingly with AI, especially, uh, this human, what makes us human, truly human, that'll become our strength as opposed to, the hard technical stuff, because that slowly but steadily will be taken over by machines that can be better and faster than us. Uh, but with that, I think let's stay on this, Anu, because you said something really important, and that is combating misinformation. Because deep fakes, manufactured stories, there's so much that floats around these days, and there is a bias, and psychology kind of validates this to a degree, right? We enjoy talking to people who agree with us. Uh, and in the past, the art of debate was a good art because a debate meant that you were able to discuss your issues, you were able to put your views forward respectfully, agree, disagree, and then if you felt the other party made a good point, take that on, and that made you a better person or a better organization. Sadly, now we don't see debates anymore. We see people jumping to the echo chambers, pointing fingers, and that's why we have this problem now where people are not talking to each other language that they all understand, and that's creating this. And technology, sadly, in this area can be problematic because misinformation spreads very, very quickly. And that's where the critical thinking of seeing something and looking at the source, verifying the source, cross-referencing that before you become part of that misinformation chain is such a key thing. And I did a talk on this a while back, but this was around how criminals can leverage resources available in the dark web to spread this misinformation. There are whole packages available to do this kind of stuff. And this was even before AI became so powerful. So imagine its power now. So we recognize that. But if you had to think from a scams perspective, because I think you brought that up, that criminals are relying on us lowering our guard and us lowering, our ability to spot these things. From your research, from your education, you train so many people. What are you seeing as the top three scams that we need to think about and double down in terms of our vigilance against? What those three would be?
No, good question, Chirag. So before I get to the scams, I think I just want to talk about AI for a little bit because
Yes, sure.
AI is, thank you, is this latest bit of technology, right? So technology it's a continuum. Technologies keep evolving. The conversations about technology stay the same because each new technology will bring with it benefits, but also will bring with it a lot of negative side effects if those aren't recognized and dealt with. And AI is this latest in a chain of new technology. So it's not new. It's new wine in an old bottle, as I like to say. The new technologies will change how crime is occurring a little bit. It will add on, it will amplify because that's the nature of the internet today. So with AI, I hear a lot of euphoria. And yes, there is a lot to be happy about, but I always tell people that are rushing to embrace new technologies, because this was what my PhD thesis was about, is do we really examine the side effects before we rush to adopt and embrace, right? Like that's something that I think citizens, us users, need to understand before we rush to take up the next big thing. And I know that doesn't always happen in business and economy context, but I think it's really important because many times the risks will really could outweigh the benefits. And then we'd have put into place things that have a long time for those ramifications to play out. So just, a word for people when new technologies come in is to also think not just of the positive, but let's keep a lookout for the side effects as well. And in terms of scams, so I can talk about Singapore mainly because that's where I focus a lot of my work on. So some of the scams that we've had to be really mindful of are those involving cryptocurrencies, and that's something that has been on the rise. So things like rug pulls, so cryptocurrency scams where people are made to invest, and then before you know it, the investor is gone and your money is gone with them. So that's something to be really wary of when people come with you for investments and say, hey, invest in us, please do your due diligence before investing in anything. The others are, of course, job-related scams, and those have been on the rise as well. So it requires job seekers to understand that anyone that asks you to pay something up front, that's a red flag already. So always be mindful when someone is asking you to pay upfront for any type of online activity. And then another scam that comes to my mind is you have something called pig butchering scams, which is a combination of a cryptocurrency-based scam and a love scam. So it's like double whammy for a victim because they're going to be losing someone that they've come to love, but also losing a significant share of money. So all these are new innovations in scams, but they follow the same principles, and it requires us to be just more aware of what those potential red flags could be.
Yeah, look, I mean, it still preys upon our core human tendencies, right? Our human tendencies to be empathetic, to be trusting, to be helpful, and be greedy, right? I
And
mean,
to want
all of,
love.
yeah, exactly. And romance scams, as you kind of brought that up, those typically prey on the vulnerable a lot more. People who have gone through life situations, people who are older, maybe have had issues in the past, and I think that's where they are so dangerous and so devastating. To your point, it's not just money; it's an emotional hit as well to us, which is so much more than just money, as important as that is. Uh, and I remember, Anu, when we were initially chatting, and I was looking at some of the work you had done. You had a pretty cool video which I encourage people to check out on YouTube, that you talked about your story and online dating. And it's always good to hear from people's own perspective, right? So when you reflect on the time you did that video, your experiences, that led up to that point since then, uh, how do you see this, right? Like beyond just scams, as a person, and more people are using online apps for dating. It's just become part of our thing, like anything else. We need technology, and we are using technology for it. What are some of the critical thinking aspects that come into the mix there? And we all like, I think we all feel like we are smart enough to detect that. But hey, the rise in these scams tell us otherwise, right? So clearly something's off between our perception of our ability and the data that, is not supporting it. What do you think people can do better there?
That's a interesting question, because actually, Chirag, we can see that this question in general can be related to how to spot red flags online in general. And the reason that the whole online dating thing came about, and this is what I told you earlier, is when I was going through my divorce, and I was suddenly finding myself dating again after, I think, 17 years. So I had, obviously, online dating was completely new. And because of the background and the work I do, I was approaching it also from this perspective of, oh my God, there are a lot of shady characters online. And it just got me thinking about, this is another set of people, dating app users that need to be educated and need to be more aware, because the emotional toll it takes when you're trying to find not just necessarily love, but trying to find a companion, a date, it does have an emotional toll, as do a lot of our online activities. And so the idea is, like I said, how do we stay happier when we're doing these things? And when we want to stay happier, we need to be aware. We can't be ignorant and happy. It's a bit difficult to have both. So my idea was how to get more people to have a better time when they're seeking love. I mean, it shouldn't be this difficult. And the red flags are the same as any other red flags, right? If something is too good to be true, it most likely is. So be mindful if someone is trying to pressure you into loving too soon, or paying too soon, or investing too soon, or scaring you into doing any of them. Take a step back. That's why the detaching, the detoxing, and to think again is really important before all that information overpowers you with the emotion. When something really emotionally overpowers you, that's when you need to, it's very difficult, but you have to step back and think about it a little more logically, talk to someone else, because when we are so emotionally invested, it's difficult to see the red flags. That's why talking to someone, a friend, a colleague, an expert, whoever it is, you can stop it before you get in too deep.
Yeah, no, well said. It's a tricky issue. I mean, whenever it comes to emotions, that's why, there are no textbooks just necessarily on emotions, right? Like we all feel differently. But you're right, like just pausing, reflecting, and there's some obvious red flags to your point. Like money is to me always a red flag. Like anytime somebody asks me for money, that's something which alarm bells should go off, because typically, I'm not saying always, but very often for adults, that's why people go after you is money. There are other reasons, that come down the chain, but money for kids though, and that's a bit different. So that's why I think it's you got to think about who you are and who you're trying to do it for. Uh, and then when we talk about, and now we're just kind of thinking about this from a organizational perspective as well, and not just individuals. Uh, Cyber awareness and training, like coming to that, right? The core awareness and training. We've talked about evolutions in every aspect here, right? Dating, crypto, investments, progress, AI. But look at the quality of our cyber awareness and training, sadly, for most organizations. I'm not saying for everyone, for most of them, is still stuck 5 years ago. Is still stuck in that compliance checkbox mindset where we just talk about phishing and you talk about some, a hodgepodge of different things, Wi-Fi, password, throw everything in kitchen sink at people and expect them to suddenly become experts. That's not working. Studies keep telling us that over 90% of cybersecurity breaches and incidents happen because of human errors and mistakes and us not following process. And often even after knowing the process. So that's where it makes it more interesting, right? It's not the knowledge of it, it's the application of the knowledge where the problem lies. So I think that's something which I think we really should talk about in terms of where we are going wrong. And something I always advocate is behavior change as opposed to just awareness. And AI, to your point, became like we talked about it, right? AI makes it easier. Deepfakes make it easier to spoof voices, spoof faces. We can, thanks to things like generative AI, write much more sophisticated messages. In all of this, technology can help address some of it and fight it, but the role of human critical thinking will become even more important. And in the past, it failed, even when it came just things like phishing. So now we're dealing with a whole different ball game. So we just can't keep doing the good old stuff that we did. It didn't work then. It's not going to work now. So how do we change the pattern on this one? Maybe we start with some of your thoughts there, Anu, and then I can chime in some of mine.
Sure, sure. I think I definitely agree with a lot of what you said, Chirag. I know we've discussed this earlier, which is, for me, I feel that a lot of, and you're right, it's some organizations have been doing this very well, but in my experience, a majority of the organizations and employees I speak to are employing a type of cybersecurity training that is more of, like you said, check the box kind of compliance related, and it's something that people rush to finish. And what I'm proposing and what I do, and I know this is what you do as well, is to have a kind of cybersecurity culture in an organization that people are enthused to learn about cyber. So how can we do this? Well, for one, we can bring in people that make it something exciting or something interesting, something interactive, right? I mean, people think of cyber and they think it's a dry topic, but you and I are quite enjoying ourselves having this conversation. And my workshops are always interactive. And I think one of the USPs is that we can make even topics that seem dry, not dry. There's a lot we can do. And the other thing is to make it personal. Every single person has a personal stake when it comes to knowing more about cyber. For organizations, if they either want to, their employees, like we all know this, those of us in cyber, that they are the greatest strength, but also the biggest weakness. Employees are the first line of defense. You can have the best technology and tools. It will never be 100% foolproof. That's why we need this additional element of human involvement. But people, if they don't care, they're not going to make that effort. But once you have either trainings or educational material resources that show them, oh my God, this is related to me, my family, my organization, my role. When you make it personal, I've seen that people walk away with that aha feeling that, now I know why it's important. Now I know why I should care. I think that's where things have to change. We have to move away from once a year kind of trainings to more interactive, more often, because the criminals aren't doing this once a year. They are innovating every single day, and that's where we fall behind. So I think that's something that needs to change.
Yeah, no, very good points. Make it personal, regardless of, I'll always use this line and I mean it, is regardless of our job titles, we are all chief information security officers of our own homes. The safety and well-being of our kids' families online rely on us to be smart about these things, right? So making it personal, the emotional connection with stories, with analogies, making it a bit funny, interactive. I think that's such a big part of it. Anything that we do and are engaged in beyond just reading, it'll register us a lot more in our memory. That's why the act of writing, even like physically writing something, has been shown to be so much more powerful than just looking at something or typing. You retain a lot more that way. Just in time training, to your point of providing that when people need it, as opposed to just this one-off thing. Role based, a training that is required for a developer might be very different than a training required for a finance person, and even more different than somebody who works in legal or HR. And I think you just got to be smart about it. And I do think bringing in experts from externally from time to time to help your organizations be more engaged can be really powerful. And they don't replace your internal efforts, but they bring a fresh energy, perspective, and guidance, and even a bit of a check and challenge to your internal processes. I think it goes a long way, which is why I really like that aspect of it. In doing workshops are so much more powerful than just a 1 hour session where somebody's just talking nonstop. I think people are just tired of that. You want to be engaged, and I feel now with technology being as advanced as it is, and we can use it smartly, there's a lot, like if you give people a sense of control, that they believe that they're in charge of their destiny and what they can do a lot. If you give them a feeling of hopelessness, oh, all these breaches and incidents and it's going to happen to you, and it's like, that's not very promising, is it? If something's bad going to happen to me and I can do nothing about it, what's the point of it all, right? And I really don't believe in that message. I think there is so much we can do. In fact, things like multi-factor authentication, being patching your systems, having backups, just these three things can go a long way in eliminating most of the cyber threats that you face, beyond awareness. And obviously, awareness is a big part of it. So it's not always as hard as people make it out to be, sadly. And I think that's where we got to go in and simplify the message. And you are absolutely right, bringing that element of pragmatism and doing it with a bit of fun. Like, let's have fun doing this, which is why I like the gamification aspect of it. And for the longest time, when people thought gamification, they thought of as those phishing simulation exercises. That's a very small part of it. There are escape rooms, there are competitions, there is so much more you can do with it. And that's where people like you and I come in, because we enjoy innovating on this front, right? Like, this is what we think about. This is where we get a joy from. Some people might think, what's wrong with these people? How are they having so much fun doing this? But we do. So I think that's really key.
And also, Chirag, I think the thing that's important is that there's this that there should be a mix of technical and social. That say, and you and I are this example, right? Like, and we talked about this, which is that one can't do without the other, because we need to work together. It's been the way things have been working have typically been in silos. And I think we have to move away from that. The safety and security have to work together in the trainings, but also I would say within organizations that security, and I know that CISOs and security information officers are talking about this a lot, which is it's not just our problem, right? We have to get buy-in from the whole organization. I think that's what organizations have to start thinking about when they say they don't have budgets. Then you're actually putting your entire company at risk, because security is so crucial that people can't afford to say that anymore. I don't think it's a valid argument.
Yeah, look, community expectations are changing. The government's coming out and telling us that, right? Like, the laws are changing, and I it's something that is so core to the value that we are trying to create. Is to protecting that value, is to enable this value, is to get citizens, if they want to adopt more digital services, and for governments to be more efficient, for people to trust these things and be smart at doing them. I think there's so much at stake here. And that's what I think people need to realize. And where they put awareness and training in a nice to have, it's a disastrous decision, because studies and everything that we've seen have backed exactly what you said. It's not a technical issue. Throw all the tools at it, people operating them, people running with them, people who are dealing and doing business every day are not engaging, nothing's going to work. And you're going to create a bigger problem for yourself, especially as we enter this new realm. So I'm not for scaring people. I'm actually there to give them hope that if you train your people smartly, if you educate them, if you equip them, hey, you will actually be in a much better situation. And all these doomsday scenarios, they'll not be something that you need to worry about, because while incidents happen, if you're prepared, if you have trained people, if you have the right processes, you will respond to them and you will overcome them. If a coffee, falls on your shirt and you stain your shirt, it's not the end of the world. You'll get a new shirt. There's a process. You can get it cleaned. Yeah, it's a minor inconvenience for some time. Like, we got to think about incidents this way. We got to stop thinking about all the doomsday projections that we keep making, and there are people who are vested interest in making it that way, right? So you're right. Like, and here in Australia, at least, the new Australian cybersecurity strategy, I'm very heartened, as we're placing a big focus on awareness and training, especially for small and medium businesses who have a very different challenge because they have limited budgets. And when they ask me how do I spend my money, I tell them awareness should be a big part of it, because your people end up using so many different tools, some of it free, some of it on their own personal devices, where it's still your data. You got to educate them. So no, Anu, you've been really gracious with your time, and I really appreciate it. Are there any closing thoughts that you want to share with the audience, things that you want them to take away with as they think about this episode, and especially you, and obviously you and I will, share more collaboration together. But anything that you believe that audience should take away?
Oh, thanks, Chirag. No, it's been great being on the podcast as well. It's great having, these are conversations that must be had, and to have them with people that not just agree with you, but are also working in the same space with the same amount of passion. I mean, that's precious. So no, thank you for having me also on the show. And what do I want people to go back with? I think it would just be to do something very simple, like an inventory of sorts. This is what I make some of my workshop participants do, which is how much tech do we really have in our lives? Every single app or whatever we log into an account is a gateway for a potential cyber breach. Like if we think about it that way, apps that we don't use, things that we don't access, I would recommend deleting them so that we cover our tracks better. So for what I say, technology less is more, so that we're in a safer situation. And I would say that to my kids as well. Just do this inventory, or maybe once every quarter, something like a financial inventory. Discard what you don't need, do some spring cleaning, and just try and stay on top of what actually you are doing on the internet.
Yeah, no, well, it's such a great point, such an important point, and it's something very simple that people can take back and think about it, an inventory of all the tech. And I know it's hard, but at least start with putting that, and you will quickly realize how exposed we are if we don't do this smartly. And my takeaways are similar, and I also think from an organizational perspective, as you think about the behaviors you want your people to change, bring it back to your business and the risks that are most important for you, right? Don't try to throw everything in kitchen sink at your people, because they'll get overwhelmed and end up doing nothing, as opposed to it's three behaviors you really want to focus on. So with that, thank you, Anu, for again the time that you've given us. Really appreciate it, and we'll share a lot more about Anu's experience and where you can find her in the show notes. And to our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you like what we do, please subscribe to our channels. It helps us bring in more awesome guests like Anu. With that, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.